welcome to this deep dive. I want to speak directly to you, the listener, right out of the gate.
Yeah, because you're exactly the kind of person who actually pays attention to the undercurrents of our culture.
Exactly. You're someone interested in the history of our institutions, the men's rights movement, and those red-pilled manosphere perspectives. You don't just take the mainstream narrative at face value.
You want to know the actual mechanics behind the curtain.
Right. So I want to hook you right now by posing a pretty massive question. How did the language we use every single day become a battleground for institutional control?
It's wild to think about.
I mean, how did the very words we speak get weaponized before the public even realized a war was happening?
Most people still don't realize it.
They really don't. But
No.
before we start mapping out this battlefield, please make sure to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss a deep dive.
Definitely do that.
Because today's deep dive is an incredibly comprehensive, ultra-long, incisive, and fascinating review of an explosive new ebook. If you want to understand the history of our institutions before they were purportedly captured by feminists and Marxists, you are going to want to buy this book.
It's a heavy hitter.
I explicitly encourage you to check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to purchase it. Also, make sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack.
That's at Conrad Riker.
Right. So the book we are exploring today is Conrad Riker's 2024 ebook, Dissecting Woke: How Cultural Marxism Manipulates Language for Power. Our mission today is to unpack Riker's incredibly detailed claims about how this ideological capture actually happened.
And before we get into the philosophical deep end of Riker's framework, I need to make a very clear, mandatory impartiality disclaimer for you, the listener.
This is important.
The source material we are examining today, Conrad Riker's book, contains highly politically charged right-wing content. We must make it crystal clear to you that we are never taking sides. We are not endorsing the viewpoints, the political stances, or the conclusions of this content. Our sole mission is to impartially report on the material.
We're just the guides here.
Exactly, serving as your expert guides to convey Riker's ideas and arguments to you. We're just showing you the architecture of his perspective.
Right, because knowledge is most valuable when you understand it critically. So, with that established, we have to start where Riker sleeps, the historical bedrock.
He goes way back.
He doesn't just look at a college campus protest from last week. He traces the roots of what we call woke culture all the way back to the early 20th century Frankfurt School.
Yeah, we're talking about thinkers like Theodor Adorno, Max Horkheimer, Herbert Marcuse.
Right. And Riker argues these intellectuals laid the groundwork, but it didn't fully mutate until the postmodern philosophers like Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault showed up later.
That's where this shift really happens. To understand why, you have to look at the transition from economic Marxism to cultural Marxism.
Right, because classical Marxism was all about economics, right? The proletariat versus the bourgeoisie.
Exactly. Marx thought economic friction would lead to violent revolutions in industrialized nations. But by the 1920s and 30s, the Frankfurt School guys looked around and realized the revolution wasn't happening in the West.
Because capitalism was actually raising the standard of living.
Workers were buying homes and cars, they weren't picking up pitchforks. So Adorno and Marcuse shifted the focus. If you can't foment revolution through class struggle, you do it through cultural struggle.
Enter critical theory.
Right. Critical theory seeks to relentlessly critique and find hidden power imbalances in every aspect of Western culture. The goal isn't to understand the system.
It's just to dismantle it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the weaponization of language really kicks into high gear when the postmodernists take the baton.
Which brings us to Derrida and Foucault. Derrida gives us deconstruction, this radical idea that words don't have fixed objective meanings.
Meaning is always subjective to him.
And then Foucault injects power into that. He says knowledge is never objective, it's always an expression of power.
So when you synthesize Derrida and Foucault, you get this terrifying conclusion. Language stops being a neutral tool.
It becomes an active battlefield. Every word you use is either enforcing an oppressive power structure or dismantling it. There is no neutral ground.
And Riker argues this postmodern view of language is the operating system of the modern progressive movement. It's why there's such an intense focus on policing vocabulary today.
Because if language is power, controlling the dictionary means controlling society.
Precisely.
So Riker leans heavily on this philosophical concept called the Hegelian dialectic to explain how this control is actually implemented. I'd love to get a breakdown of this because Riker calls it the Marxists' secret weapon.
Yeah, let's walk through the mechanics of it. It's essentially a strategy of creating a controlled crisis. Step one is the thesis.
the status quo.
Right. The established societal norm, the traditions. Step 2 is the antithesis. This is a radical, opposing idea deliberately introduced to contradict the thesis.
Just to cause friction.
Maximum friction, conflict, a sense of crisis. And then step 3 is the synthesis. After this grueling conflict exhausts society, a new compromised reality emerges.
And that synthesis becomes the new societal norm.
Exactly. And then, crucially, that synthesis becomes the new thesis, and the cycle starts all over again. It only turns in one direction further left.
Riker uses historical examples for this, right? Like the French Revolution?
Yeah, the old aristocratic order was the thesis. The radical Jacobin demand for absolute equality was the antithesis. The Reign of Terror forged a new synthesis.
He also mentions Mao's Cultural Revolution. The traditional Chinese elders were the thesis. The radicalized youth Red Guards were the antithesis.
Total upending of thousands of years of norms. But Riker argues this exact same machinery is operating right now in the West, just culturally.
Okay, let's apply it to the modern day. Take traditional gender roles or the nuclear family. That's the thesis.
A married mother and father raising kids. That is the established thesis.
So cultural Marxists systematically introduce the antithesis. Fluid identity concepts, non-binary theories, challenging those structures.
Pushed through media and academia, it creates massive cultural friction. Parents fighting school boards, legislative battles.
And the resulting synthesis is a new destabilized norm. The definitions of family and gender are blurred. Society is pushed closer to the Marxist goal of dismantling traditional structures.
It's a deliberate, calculated strategy.
So if the dialectic is the macro strategy, the specific words we use are the tactical weapons. This brings us to weaponizing the lexicon. Riker compares this to George Orwell's 1984.
Newspeak.
Exactly. The idea that if a regime controls the words, they control what people can even conceptualize. You can't commit a thought crime if you don't have the vocabulary for it.
And Riker connects this directly to the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci.
Gramsci is huge in this book.
He really is. Gramsci developed the theory of cultural hegemony from a fascist prison in the 1920s. He argued the ruling class maintains power not through military force, but by controlling the culture.
The media, universities, language.
Right. They shape the narrative during a crisis of state authority so thoroughly that their ideology just becomes common sense.
It alters the socio-political equilibrium.
Yes. And Riker argues the woke movement adopted Gramsci's playbook. They co-opt existing words, gut them, and use them to demand ideological obedience.
Let's talk about the specific vocabulary shifts Riker highlights, starting with the word woke itself.
Originally from African American vernacular English.
Right, meaning awareness of physical danger and racial injustice. But Riker says it was co-opted by the affluent progressive elite.
It morphed into an institutional compliance metric, a purity test.
Then there's microaggressions, coined by Chester M. Pierce in 1970.
Riker shows how it morphed from a psychological term into an HR surveillance tool. It encodes victimhood and polices everyday speech.
Because it operates on subjective intent. It doesn't matter what you meant, only how the other person interpreted it.
Terrifying for everyday interactions.
Absolutely. And the shift from equality to equity is massive in Riker's analysis.
Equality used to mean equal opportunity, a fair starting line.
But equity means forced equal outcomes. Riker argues it demands the active dismantling of meritocracy to achieve cosmic fairness.
And to enforce this, they redefined violence. Traditionally, violence meant physical harm.
Right, but now it's expanded to include non-physical acts, like misgendering someone or expressing dissenting political opinions.
They call speech violence. And if speech is violence, the woke brigade feels justified in silencing critics, sometimes with actual physical violence.
Because they claim it's self-defense. Riker also details the psychological tactics here. Framing, priming, euphemisms, dysphemisms.
The euphemisms are fascinating. Like saying reallocating resources instead of defund the police.
To sanitize a politically toxic slogan.
Oh, that's true.
Or using reproductive health to completely sanitize the abortion debate.
And they use dysphemisms to demonize opponents. You're not just holding a different view, you're a fascist or a bigot. It bypasses debate entirely.
Which brings us to where these tactics are deployed. Part 3, the capture of education and big tech. The thought police.
Schools and universities have totally transitioned.
From bastions of free thought to activism factories, Riker details the shift toward mandatory diversity training and safe spaces.
Safe spaces that function purely as echo chambers. They shield students from challenging ideas.
Riker gives some crazy real-world campus examples, like Professor John Cisna at Iowa State.
faced severe institutional pressure just for conservative viewpoints on his personal social media.
Or Noah Droddy at UC Berkeley, a moderate who just questioned the validity of safe spaces in an op-ed and faced a mob demanding his expulsion.
The most illustrative is Professor Peter Boghossian at Portland State.
The grievance studies affair. This was hilarious but dark.
He and his colleagues intentionally wrote absurd, mathematically flawed papers using woke jargon. One argued dog parks were manifestations of rape culture.
And peer-reviewed journals actually published them.
But instead of fixing their academic disciplines, the university went after Boghossian. He eventually resigned, saying the university was just an indoctrination center now.
Riker connects this to Jonathan Haidt's The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yes, showing how these ideas leave a generation intellectually fragile.
He also cites David Horowitz's One-Party Classroom and Heather McDonald's The Diversity Delusion, proving the ideological capture is top-down and destroying meritocracy.
And those graduates go on to staff Silicon Valley, which leads to the alliance between woke culture and big tech.
The censorship is algorithmic and global, Twitter shadow banning, Google search manipulation.
Riker points to the overt deplatforming of Donald Trump, silencing a sitting U.S. president.
And the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story right before the 2020 election.
Proving these platforms are hyper-partisan publishers, not neutral squares.
So how can you, the listener, fight back? Riker offers solutions for education. Homeschooling, charter schools, Khan Academy, Waldorf schools. Get out of the system.
And for tech, he advocates alternative platforms. Gab, Parler, BitChute.
But even those rely on centralized servers.
Right, which is why he pushes for decentralized tech. Mastodon, using VPNs, and mesh networking, creating peer-to-peer webs that monopolies can't shut down.
That leads us right into part 4, intersectionality and the oppression Olympics.
This concept is everywhere now.
Riker traces its origins to Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. It was originally a legal framework to help marginalized black women in anti-discrimination law.
But Riker argues it mutated catastrophically. It transformed into a rigid identity hierarchy, a victimhood culture.
The oppression Olympics. The more marginalized categories you check off, the more moral authority you have.
It's a trap. It leads to learned helplessness. It divides society into competing factions.
Riker contrasts this with MLK Jr. or Gandhi, who united people under common human rights themes. Intersectionality just fragments us.
You saw this in the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020. Internal intersectional fighting constantly derailed the core message.
And social media amplifies this through cancel culture and virtue signaling. It incentivizes public shaming for social capital.
There's no room for empathy or nuance.
Now we get to a massive section for our audience. Part 5, the war on masculinity.
Riker dissects how cultural Marxism is systematically dismantling traditional manhood.
He starts with emasculation in media. Men are portrayed as weak, indecisive, bumbling fools.
He specifically points to Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory, the archetype of the emasculated male managed by women.
And Ross and Joey from Friends. Ron is constantly undermined, and Joey is just a dim-witted caricature.
It conditions young men to think traditional masculinity is ridiculous.
Then Riker calls out the corporate elite. The 2019 Gillette ad.
That was a watershed moment.
They framed normal male behavior as toxic masculinity, demanding men shave away their natural instincts.
Contrast that with Dove's campaign for real beauty. Dove affirmed women. But their counterpart ad for men just focused on men crying and being emotionally overwhelmed.
Pushing the narrative that real male strength is only found in shedding stoicism.
Which ties into the shift in modern feminism. First wave wanted equality. Modern feminism views traditional masculine virtues, strength, protectiveness, as inherently toxic.
The language here is weaponized. Riker references Scott Yenor's work on the term soy boy.
A man who completely capitulates to the woke narrative, surrendering his masculine instincts.
And on the flip side, Theodore Beale's analysis of the term incel.
They weaponized it to demonize any man who critiques modern dating or feminist hypocrisy. You're either a compliant soy boy or a dangerous incel.
No space for healthy masculinity. And the societal toll is severe. Riker cites the WHO statistic, a 3-to-1 male-to-female suicide ratio.
Increased depression.
Yeah.
And a destabilization of the traditional family unit because of the absence of strong male role models.
So if masculinity is being dismantled, who holds the power? Part 6, the feminist power wheel and legal disparities.
Riker debunks the patriarchy narrative by flipping the feminist power wheel, a 2004 domestic abuse tool.
The Duluth model.
Right. He argues that women actually dominate modern societal structures now,
He brings hard stats. Women make up the majority of university graduates. They live longer.
but men make up 93% of workplace fatalities, literally dying to maintain civilization.
And pop culture reinforces this female dominance. Riker cites Captain Marvel, where she's flawlessly powerful, and the men are incompetent sidekicks.
And Taylor Swift's The Last Great American Dynasty, elevating women as historical shapers while minimizing men.
But the real institutional bias is in family court. Women are granted custody over 80% of the time.
Men are reduced to visitors and walking wallets.
The justice system has been weaponized. False accusations can permanently destroy a man without evidence.
Plus, crushing alimony laws.
And Riker aggressively critiques the Violence Against Women Act. VAWA disproportionately favors female victims, even though studies show domestic violence is often reciprocal.
Male victims are utterly abandoned by the state.
But then Riker makes a fascinating pivot in Part 7, the erasure of women and the queer theory quagmire.
He argues the feminist movement has been hijacked by a more radical ideology.
Traditional figures like Susan B. Anthony or Betty Friedan wouldn't even recognize today's movement because it has erased biological women in favor of trans rights.
He cites Camille Paglia and Elizabeth Bedenter, author of When Women Lose. Hard-won women's rights are being sacrificed.
Driven by queer theory, traced back to the 1990s and Judith Butler's gender trouble.
Butler's concept of performativity. Gender is just a social performance.
Queer theory takes this to the extreme, attempting to obliterate biological sex entirely as a stable category. It conflates sex, gender, and sexual orientation.
It's the ultimate war on objective reality, unmooring humanity from truth.
And there are real-world physical consequences. Trans women in UK female prisons, leading to safety concerns for female inmates.
The destruction of fair female sports. Biological women losing scholarships to biological males with insurmountable physiological advantages.
And the medical trend involving children. A 1,000% spike in referrals to the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic.
A peer-driven social contagion fueled by queer theory.
Riker uses the 2011 California Fair Education Act as a case study, institutionalizing queer theory into kindergarten curriculums, bypassing parental consent.
The state driving a wedge between parent and child.
Which leads right into Part 8, the assault on marriage and the family. If you dismantle gender, the next target is marriage.
Cultural Marxists have reshaped it from a lifelong religious covenant into a temporary secular contract.
The normalization of no-fault divorce, cohabitation, same-sex marriage, stripping the institution of its child-rearing purpose.
The economic fallout is devastating. Bradford Wilcox's marriage gap data shows being raised in a married family is the greatest predictor of success.
While Annie Lowry's work details the poverty cycle of single-mother households.
And yet, men are terrified to marry. Riker uses Helen Smith's Men on Strike to explain why.
It's a rational calculation. The legal deck is stacked. Divorce risks losing access to kids and assets in a biased family court system. Men are financially and legally terrified.
But Riker offers strategies to reclaim it. Government tax incentives for joint filing.
The vital role of religious communities to reestablish the marital vow.
And marriage education programs, referencing John Gottman's clinical work.
All right, this brings us to the final section. Part 9, the red pill resistance. A blueprint for men.
Taking the red pill, like in The Matrix.
Waking up to the cultural Marxist reality.
Right.
Refusing to participate in your own subjugation.
Riker provides a 5-step survival guide. Step 1, self-education.
Form a Maginot Line of the mind. Read the forbidden texts. Become an independent thinker.
Step 2, build support networks. You can't fight this alone.
Find offline and online brotherhoods, uncensored spaces to speak truth.
Step 3, political engagement. Join men's rights organizations. Push for legal reform, like 50-50 shared parenting.
Step 4, physical fitness. Adopt Spartan-like discipline.
Physical strength builds mental fortitude to resist cultural pressure.
And step 5, financial independence. Build a power base so you cannot be canceled or controlled by woke corporate HR departments.
Become uncancelable.
This book is a massive warning beacon. But looking at where tech is going, it raises a lingering, provocative question that wasn't explicitly covered in the book.
What's that?
If cultural Marxists have successfully captured the language of human institutions today, what happens when artificial intelligence programmed by these very same captured tech companies and universities begins to generate the majority of our written language?
Wow.
Will the Hegelian dialectic become entirely automated? locking us into a synthesized reality we can no longer escape.
That is a terrifying thought. Automating the dialectic.
It really is. So, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Please take a second to like and subscribe to the show.
Yes, like and subscribe.
We just reviewed an incredibly impactful ebook. I urge you to go to Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books right now to buy Dissecting Woke: How Cultural Marxism Manipulates Language for Power.
Get the book, folks.
And make sure to follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack for more insights. Thank you so much for listening. Stay curious and keep questioning the narrative.